Some of the most ancient legends from around the world center on stories involving the myth of dog-like humanoids terrorizing small towns and devouring livestock in only a few bites. From ancient legends surrounding that of strange wolfmen to the more recent myths surrounding strange cases of werewolves terrorizing whole communities, there has never been a shortage of witness accounts and stories surrounding what can only be described as the werewolf species. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we will be going over 4 of the most mysterious werewolf cases from around the world and what they reveal to us surrounding these impossible to understand dog-like humanoid creatures. The case of Peter Stumpp. In the small German town of Ephrath, between the years of 1564 and 1589, a strange case would develop surrounding that of witchcraft and werewolves that would later be known as the case of Peter Stumpp. According to a 16-page pamphlet that was published in London back in the year 1590, of which was an English translation of a German printed document, the pamphlet describes the small town of Ephrath as having been at the centre of a number of impossible-to-explain attacks from a large wolf-like monster. This monster would go on to attack 18 victims over the span of 25 years. Additional details, according to the pamphlet, describes that the victims of the dog-like monster were mostly children, with 14 of the victims having been described as young children and 2 of the victims having been pregnant mothers with almost fully developed fetuses. Due to the large numbers of victims and the growing number of attacks over the next 2 decades, an investigation was put underway into trying to understand why the monster was attacking the village and where it could be located. This would lead to the trial of Peter Stumpp and the accusations from the town of supposed witchcraft. Not much surrounding the man exists in the modern day, but accounts of his wife passing away due to mysterious circumstances was a prevalent issue in his adult life. Additionally, historians have speculated that Peter Stumpp had been a man of exceptional wealth, working as a farmer as well as being involved in the politics of the nearby town of Bedburg. After his arrest and interrogation, Peter Stumpp would later admit that the majority of his youth was spent worshipping the devil and practicing dark rituals of witchcraft in an attempt to satiate his most personal and morbid desires. This ritualistic worship, as he claimed, began when he was only 12 years old and had continued well into his adult life. These practices would lead him to eventually being visited by the devil, of whom would give him a belt that, when worn, would allow Peter Stumpp to transform into a wolf-like monster. The trial ended shortly after his admission and resulted in the execution of himself, his family, and a mistress found at his residence during the trial. No further attacks were reported. Hans the Werewolf. Known as the legend of Hans the Werewolf, one of the strangest trials to have ever taken place in the country of Estonia centered around the prevalent werewolf and witchcraft trials of 1651. According to a number of key Estonian documents, there was an increase in werewolf attacks that ravaged villages all around the country and led to actual witch hunts, werewolf trials, and claims that would be used as political agendas to take the assets of others and gain power via false information of political opponents. Though it is widely accepted that many involved in these trials were those of innocent people, as reported werewolf attacks continued following their trials and sentencing, one case stands out the most for evidence of true werewolf involvement, known as the case of Hans the Werewolf. Only 18 years old, a young man by the name of Hans was known throughout his town as a hermit of whom lived a sad and lonely life. Many historians believe that it was perhaps due to this isolation that he was made a prime suspect in recent werewolf attacks by the authorities in the region, forcing him into a trial and investigation he had not been aware of in the slightest. After entering the trial, it became apparent that the judge responsible for the trial was not interested in pursuing the case and believed it to be nothing more than a case of mass hysteria from those performing the werewolf investigations. The judge would then provide Hans a countless number of instances to admit his innocence to allow him to go free, first opening the court by asking Hans a direct question if he was a werewolf. Without any provocation or intimidation, Hans admitted to being a werewolf with no hesitation. even going as far as claiming that he had been bitten by a werewolf man 2 years prior and became infected by the curse. In an effort to save the young man's life, the judge asked him if Hans still felt like a man, to which Hans immediately replied that he felt like a wild beast. With one last attempt to save Hans' life, the judge then asked Hans if there was a physical transformation or if it was merely all in his head and that this was nothing more than a case of personal insanity. Hans replied to the court that he had evidence of being a werewolf and showed several large scars from previous claims of defensive strikes the townspeople had made against the werewolf, claiming that he had received them as a werewolf and that the scars stayed in his human form. Shortly after, the trial was finished and Hans was sentenced to death. Werewolves of Skinwalker Ranch. All across North America are reports of the creature known as the Dogman, a strange werewolf-like creature that seems to possess supernatural strength and terrifying abilities. Some have often compared the creature to that of a more dog-like Sasquatch, whereas others believe it to be more of a werewolf beast and at the centre of the numerous Skinwalker legends. It appears that these strange theories are all the more connected when looking at the witness accounts taken from those that have experienced a number of the strange events at the Skinwalker Ranch. According to a mother named Rihanna Smith, she had been driving down an old dirt road located near Skinwalker Ranch with her young infant son in the car trying to get to a friend's house for a small party that they had planned ahead of time. As she approached the corner of an intersection near the ranch, she claimed that a large cow had run onto the dirt road after it had rushed out of the nearby bushes covering the sides of the pathway and ran directly in front of the vehicle. Before she could react, the car struck the cow head-on and stopped the vehicle from moving. However, the witnesses were not injured in any way as the car had already been slowing down ahead of time. As the car came to a stop, the woman noticed a large wolf-like creature that was standing on its hind legs and staring directly at the car as the headlights were shining brightly on its pelt. This caused the monster to turn and run away in fear. Shortly after, Skinwalker investigators were on the scene and questioned the mother and son separately to better understand what had occurred. The investigators would later write that even the young son mentioned a large wolf in the road, lending credence to the claims that the mother had made in confidence to the other reporters. Oddly enough, a number of reports surrounding that of dogmen and werewolf-like creatures seem to come from the state of Utah, the state in which the Skinwalker Ranch resides. The encounter with the werewolf of Moorbach. Definitely seen as one of the most interesting werewolf tales ever told surrounding the creature, helping to prove its existence in the modern world is that of the reported encounters with the werewolf of Moorbach, and the person of whom reported these encounters. According to the legend of the creature, back in the early 1800s, one of the top soldiers of Napoleon's army, a man by the name of Thomas Johannes Baptist Schweitzer, became a deserter to find his way back to his homeland in France after the loss at Moscow. Joined by a group of other Russian deserters, Thomas Johannes journeyed through Germany and soon came upon the town of Whitledge. As the deserting soldiers came upon the town, they soon found a small barn located close to the Rhine River that was believed to be housed by a group of witches. They believed that, as their supplies were dwindling, it would prove to be a good idea to invade the barn, defeat the family, take their supplies, and stay there for the night before moving on. This would lead to a bloodbath of the soldiers, striking down not only the father, but the children as well. As the soldiers were taking supplies and setting up areas to sleep, the mother came home and, upon seeing the bodies of her family, cursed the soldiers to be transformed into wolves at the sight of a full moon. It wasn't long before those that were cursed abandoned civilization and camped in the nearby woods, as their transformations would lead to a terrible bloodlust. A few months later, people from nearby towns would find the men and hunt them down, burying their bodies with a shrine built overhead with lit candles to prevent them from rising again as werewolves during each full moon. Stories of the candles being blown out and the creatures returning have been continued to be told in the modern day, as well as that of a military report back in 1988 from a nearby German base that was at the center of these sightings. According to the German military report, on the night of a full moon after the shrine was said to have been extinguished, an attack soon caused sirens all around the base to sound as soldiers investigated who or what had torn holes in the fences surrounding the military base. Several soldiers would later claim to have seen a large wolf-like creature standing on its hind legs, running through the base and jumping over the 9-foot-tall fences when cornered. But what do you all think of these mysterious werewolf cases from around the world that researchers are still trying to better understand in the modern day? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.